perubahan iklim yang ketika ini telah meninggalkan impak yang ketara kepada kesihatan planet. Juruserah global pada ketika ini memberi tumpuan khusus kepada usaha peralihan tenaga. Editor kanan Niaga AWANI Najib Aruf ada perinciannya dari Riyadh, Arab Saudi seiring mesyuarat khas Forum Ekonomi Dunia.
Mesyuarat khas World Economic Forum di Riyadh, Arab Saudi ini sudah pasti memberikan tumpuan antaranya adalah peralihan tenaga. Nah, peralihan tenaga ini kalau kita melihat adalah bagaimanakah cabarannya berbeza negara, khususnya negara maju di Global North dan juga negara membangun di Global South sebagai contoh. Bagaimanakah ini boleh dicantumkan? Di Malaysia kita ada New Energy Transition Roadmap NETR sebagai contoh. Namun kita juga berdepan dengan kesukaran dari segi progres kita dan juga dari segi mewujudkan lebih banyak pelaburan dalam aspek dan konteks peralihan tenaga. Bukan sahaja di Malaysia, ini tidak unik di Malaysia tapi juga di serantau dan juga bahkan negara-negara lain di peringkat dunia juga. Itu yang ingin saya bincangkan. Saya bersama dengan Roberto Bocca, Head of Center for Energy and Materials, member of the Executive Committee World Economic Forum. Thank you so much, Roberto, for joining us. Now, let's just I'm going to give you a generic question first to understand better about the energy transition, right? Energy security, especially critical concern among countries, especially to those regions that are prone to geopolitical risks, right? But how can nations balance the pursuit of energy security with the need of sustainable and also inclusive energy development on a global scale?
So you're raising the most challenging, most important point of the energy transition. Energy transition is not just one thing. According to geography where you are, some people think of energy transition as sustainability. If you go to your region, probably you're thinking energy transition more as a security or even an equity issue. So these are the three dimensions of the energy transition, and this is the challenge, is really moving the three dimensions together. If you pull on one side, you risk to not cover the other one. So if you go too much renewable too fast with too high cost, then your equitable part, so your affordability, will be damaged if you put it this way. So this is really the challenge that we have been discussing in these days, and there are a lot of good news, but let's see if this is what you want to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about the gap first, because, you know, that's the kind of discussion that we have here, because the global north countries especially, we're talking about, oh, you know, developing nations should do more in terms of investment in energy transition. But for developing nations, they are facing quite a difficult time in determining and also deciding how much investment should they put forth and put forward, especially right after the pandemic COVID-19, right? Because they are still in the midst of correcting the economy and all that. But how do we strike a balance? How do we understand that there's going to be a different level of energy transition from different regions and this should be accepted globally? Yeah,
so definitely, and again, you know, people are talking about a differentiation energy transition and multi-speed energy transition, etc. I think this is being recognized. But again, if we think of the energy transition at the three dimension of the energy triangle that you articulated, it's very important that everyone is going through the transition. It's just that in some countries the transition will bring more access and more sustainability in others and more equity in others. So I think that's one element. To your point on the investment, I think the common belief is that more money needs to go to emerging markets, but everybody is pretty clear that the money cannot come only from the emerging markets. So there is that recognition. Now the question is, how can we make sure that the investment flow more in emerging markets, because that's where the demand growth is, how we can make sure this happen there. And so if today the interest rate in an emerging economies are higher, the premium for the risk are higher, etc., how you can reduce that? We have done a study where we're showing really the capital cost is much higher in emerging economies than others, but that's where the demand for energy is. So we have really to find those financial mechanisms to reduce that premium in a way, so that more money flow in emerging economy, as you suggested.
And of course, the World Economic Forum, you know, gives a huge focus for the agency of energy transition. But given the diverse energy landscape and also varying the economy context across regions, how can countries, you know, ensure a just and also equitable transition that leaves no one behind? For instance, in Malaysia, it's quite a challenge for us to get all the industry players to be on the same page, especially for MSMEs, which is our backbone of the economy. But how do we understand connecting all these dots before we can go to the next level of energy transition?
Look, the first element that we all need to understand is the triangle, and we talk about it. The second is the complexity of the transition, and you are hinting to it. A couple of elements. One thing where everybody can work, especially the industrial sector, but also the building sector and the transport sector, is transforming the energy demand. We have done a study that came up saying around the world, there is 31% of the energy we use that we could spare, we could not use without losing any output. So effectively, we are wasting 31%. We are talking about $2 trillion a year that the global economy is wasting. So there is one element where the ecosystem of industrial ecosystem that you have in the country can really work together and say, okay, how we optimize our energy consumption across the value chain? Point one. Point two, when you have economic zone where you have a cluster of company working, in an industrial cluster, we call it, how company together they optimize? Because you see, many companies have their own objective to reduce their emission, but rarely they work across value chain and across location like a cluster. So these are huge opportunities that we have seen that are really paying off in terms of optimizing the carbon emission or reducing the carbon emission, creating jobs and creating GDP growth. So there are mechanisms.
Yeah, but is there any possibility that we can have like best practices that a country can learn from other regions, given that we have different background, economic background, and also circumstances, economic circumstances? Is there such
Absolutely,
thing? Yeah.
absolutely. This is exactly. So there are the two dimensions. Every country has a different transition. That's a fact. But there are a lot of things we can learn from each other, and then locally you can adapt. And to this extent, we have now a group of leaders that got together from 40 organizations, ministerial and CEO of company, that is trying to lead this. Is creating a playbook of all those best practices to be shared. And then the idea is really to work on them, and every country then can pick what is relevant for them. But definitely this is what we are trying to do.
But do you foresee, I want to go a little bit deeper, but do you foresee the geopolitical tensions that's happening currently, be it in Ukraine or in Middle East, will hinder the efforts of energy transition globally?
They might. We're working to avoid that.
Yeah.
The classical things that I heard saying, oh, we shouldn't buy Chinese solar panel because they are coming from one geography. And well, the climate piece is a more important one from some extent. And so I think if you look at what China has done, has really taken down the cost of solar panel for the world, or solar energy for the world. So we should buy in parallel. I also see the reason why people want to build their own supply chain, because that's also creating job and opportunity. But we shouldn't wait for new supply chain to be created while we can use the current one. So we should do the two in parallel so that wouldn't slow it down.
Then we have to be a little bit relaxed on the tariff war as well for the Chinese product and all that. Is that happening right now?
If this is happening or not is another thing. But my view on this is really we should look at where there is the cheapest, and as long as it's following the right criteria, of course, we should leverage it while we build alternatives if people have concern from the long-term sustainability, resilience of the supply chain.
Yeah.
But definitely it's an opportunity that shouldn't be lost.
Right. My last question, how do you foresee the Southeast Asia, especially if you can compare with other regions, or the way forward for Southeast Asia in terms of energy transition? How far are we behind, or how far are we in front, or where are we right now?
Well, one thing that is good, and actually mid-June we'll be releasing our energy transition index. Yeah. So we'll be ranking 120 countries. And so I cannot tell you yet how it's doing, but I can tell you that the ingredients to be successful in that is having clear roadmaps. Because when you have clear roadmaps, and a classical example on this is for me the UAE, the country next door, and also Saudi Arabia to some extent, where the country has put a clear vision and a clear roadmap, and then the implementation, of course, is the tough part.
Yep.
But already having clear roadmap is really a helpful way to incentivize investment, and for people to understand that yes, investment will be needed, and so we can trust the system. So hopefully in 2 months I will be able to tell you that the region and Malaysia is doing very well.
All right, we shall contact you in the 2 months' time. Thank you so much, Roberto, for your time. As busy guy, I have to let him go. Thank you so much for explaining and also making us understanding about the energy transition. Itu adalah antara sedikit apa yang kita bincangkan di sini. Ini semua akan dirangkumkan kerana kita melihat bahawa cabaran ini tidak boleh diselesaikan secara bersendiri. Perlu ada kerjasama di peringkat antarabangsa, terutama negara maju dan juga negara membangun. Sekian saja laporan saya untuk Astro AWANI.